You won't believe what scientists discovered when they finally analyzed King David's DNA. Centuries of mystery, exile, and legend are suddenly colliding with cutting-edge science. Hidden in his genetic code are secrets that could rewrite history, challenge ancient traditions, and reveal truths about the Davidic dynasty no one expected. The findings are as shocking as they are unbelievable. The Shepherd King and the foundation of a dynasty. Long before the grand palaces and golden temples, there was a young shepherd named David, tending his flocks in the hills of Judah. He was not born into royalty. His life was humble, shaped by quiet fields and the watchful skies. Yet, fate had other plans. The story of David, as told in the Hebrew Bible, recounts a man chosen by God, anointed by the prophet Samuel, to rise above his modest beginnings and unite a fractured people. He would become the king whose name would echo through generations. Archaeological discoveries hint that there may be truth behind the biblical narrative. The Tel Dan Stele, an ancient monument from the 9th century BCE, bears the phrase House of David. This is one of the earliest pieces of evidence linking a historical dynasty to the biblical king. Scholars continue to study the timing of his reign, generally placing it around 1010 to 970 BCE. According to biblical accounts, David ruled for 40 years, beginning with 7 years in Hebron before moving his capital to Jerusalem, where he reigned for 33 more. Family played a central role in David's life and the future of his dynasty. He fathered many children, including at least 22 sons and at least one daughter. Among his sons, figures like Absalom and Adonijah stand out, not just for their names, but for the turbulence they would bring. Intra-family rivalries were not uncommon, shaping succession in unpredictable and sometimes violent ways. Even a king as powerful as David could not escape the complex web of loyalty, ambition, and betrayal within his own household. Archaeology offers further glimpses into David's world. Some researchers, including Eilat Mazar, have identified monumental structures in Jerusalem dating back to the 10th century BCE. These may represent the royal court or palace, suggesting that David's rule left a tangible mark on the city he made his capital. Such discoveries bridge the gap between scripture and history, painting a picture of a king consolidating his power, not just spiritually but physically through construction and governance. Politically, David's achievements were monumental. By uniting the warring tribes of Israel under a single monarchy, he transformed the region's landscape. Jerusalem became more than a city, it became the heart of a nation, a symbol of political stability and divine favor. His anointing by Samuel carried both spiritual and political weight, giving legitimacy to a new centralized authority. Yet even as David built this dynasty, the very nature of early kingdoms meant that power was always fragile. External enemies loomed on the borders, and internal tensions simmered within the royal family. David's rise from shepherd to king laid the foundation for a dynasty that would endure for centuries. His vision and courage created a kingdom that became a beacon of cultural and religious identity. Yet the story of David also reminds us that even the strongest foundations are tested. As the kingdom grew, the seeds of conflict were quietly being sown, hinting at the challenges that would one day threaten the survival of the very dynasty he worked so hard to establish, the end of sovereignty and the head of the exile. The glory of the Davidic kings came to a sudden halt when Jerusalem fell and the royal line was torn from its homeland. In 597 BCE, King Jehoiakim and other members of Jewish royalty were taken captive to Babylon. The exile was not just a physical displacement, but a profound blow to the sovereignty of the kingdom. The temple, the city, and the very idea of kingship in Jerusalem were shaken. Yet even in exile, the echoes of the Davidic dynasty did not vanish. Far from their land, the descendants of the royal family began to take on a new form of leadership. In Babylon, a new office emerged known as the exilarch, or Resh Galuta in Aramaic. Talmudic sources describe this position as a symbolic head of the Jewish community in exile, a living connection to the lost monarchy. The exilarch was more than a figurehead. He exercised real authority, enforcing rabbinical court decisions and maintaining a delicate balance with the secular rulers who now governed the land. The office became a focal point for Jewish identity, giving the dispersed people a sense of continuity and legitimacy in a foreign land. The origins of the exilarchate were claimed to trace directly back to Jehoiakim, keeping the Davidic line alive in memory and in leadership. Generations later, Bostanai, under Arab rule in the 7th century, solidified the office's political and religious influence. He was granted authority over judicial appointments and became a symbol of a community striving to maintain its traditions while navigating the power of new empires. The role of the exilarch was as much about preserving a legacy as it was about wielding authority. Not every exilarch held unchallenged power. Mar Zutra II, centuries later, led a daring revolt against the Sassanid rulers, briefly establishing an independent Jewish polity in Mahoza. His story shows that even in exile, the descendants of David could assert leadership and resist subjugation. In the 10th century CE, David ben Zakkai's tenure as exilarch was marked by conflict with Saadia Gaon, a leading scholar reflecting the constant tension between spiritual authority and political leadership within the community. Throughout these centuries, the claim to Davidic descent remained central to the legitimacy of the exilarchs. Genealogical records such as the Seder Olam Zuta tried to preserve the lineage even when historical documentation was incomplete. This insistence on continuity reinforced a symbolic monarchy that persisted long after the kingdom itself had disappeared. The Davidic name became a source of identity, hope, and spiritual leadership. Though Jerusalem was lost and kingship seemed impossible, the exilarchs ensured that the idea of a Davidic monarchy survived in memory and influence. Across centuries and empires, the spiritual and symbolic power of the Davidic line endured. After centuries of exile and displacement, the descendants of the Davidic line faced a new challenge: the diaspora and the lost threads of genealogy. Jewish communities spread across the world, moving from Babylon to Europe, North Africa, and beyond. This wide dispersion, often called the diaspora, made it nearly impossible to maintain continuous genealogical records. Ordinary families lost track of their ancestry, and the once clear threads connecting generations grew tangled and fragile. Over time, the names and lineages of those who might have descended from the royal house of David were obscured, leaving only fragments in scattered documents, oral histories, and memory. Historical events only made matters worse. In 1492, the Alhambra decree forced Sephardic Jews to leave Spain. Families fled to distant lands, often under duress. Communities were uprooted, and precious records were lost. Some were destroyed, some hidden, and some never recovered. Forced conversions, migrations, and wars added layers of confusion, severing the connection to the past. Even those who preserved certain family traditions often could not prove their Davidic heritage. For many, the royal line had become a story of memory and hope rather than verifiable history. Yet modern science offers a new kind of hope. Genealogists and geneticists have begun mapping Jewish lineages using DNA. The Avatenu DNA project, for instance, has collected hundreds of Y chromosome samples from Jewish men, creating a growing catalog of paternal lines. These projects aim to trace ancient lineages and could, in theory, reveal connections to the Davidic line. While genetics cannot provide absolute proof, it can suggest patterns and ancestral links previously impossible to detect. The story of Jewish ancestry is further complicated by competing hypotheses about origins. Studies show that European Jewry, for example, is a mosaic of different ancestries. Arayan El-Haik's research contrasts the Rhineland hypothesis, which traces Jews to Central Europe, with the Khazarian hypothesis, which suggests links to a Turkic kingdom in Eastern Europe. Such findings reveal that the genetic landscape is far more complex than simple family trees can capture. Still, these scientific insights offer glimpses into paths that history alone cannot reveal. Despite the chaos of the diaspora, the memory of Davidic ancestry persisted in stories, religious texts, and community traditions. It became a spiritual thread connecting scattered communities to a shared identity and a distant royal past. Yet the question remained, could the physical line of David truly survive through centuries of upheaval? Could science uncover evidence where history had left only whispers? Even as family trees go cold and documents vanish, the possibility that genetics might map a path back to King David himself stirs both excitement and suspense. Across continents and millennia, the lost threads of genealogy wait silently, as though daring modern science to pull them together and reveal secrets hidden for thousands of years. The genetic fingerprint, Y-DNA, and patrilineal proof. Modern genetic research offers a fascinating tool, the Y chromosome. Passed almost unchanged from father to son, the Y-DNA carries a patrilineal record, a biological thread that stretches through generations. For a lineage like David's, believed to pass strictly through male descendants, Y-DNA is a perfect candidate for tracing potential connections. Several genealogical organizations have begun exploring this possibility. One of the most prominent is the Davidic dynasty group. They encourage men who believe they descend from the male line of David to take deep Y-DNA tests, often using high-resolution 67 marker Y-STR panels. These tests analyze the patterns of the Y chromosome, seeking clusters that appear consistently among men with documented Davidic ancestry. In theory, if multiple unrelated men share a distinctive Y-DNA pattern, it may point to a common male ancestor centuries ago. Yet genetics alone cannot solve the mystery. Even if two men today show nearly identical Y-DNA signatures, that similarity only proves they share a male line somewhere in the distant past. It does not confirm a direct descent from David himself. No ancient DNA from David exists, and the so-called Davidic Y chromosome is entirely hypothetical. Scientists infer its characteristics indirectly by comparing modern Jewish lineages that claim Davidic descent and looking for rare, shared patterns that cluster across communities. Many Jewish communities practiced endogamy, marrying within the same cultural or religious group. This can result in genetic similarities that appear significant but may not indicate descent from a single ancient figure. Interpretation of Y-DNA in such contexts requires caution and a careful combination of historical records, genealogical documentation, and statistical analysis. Modern computational tools, such as identity by descent detection, can help untangle these threads. By identifying segments of DNA shared across multiple individuals, researchers can infer ancestral connections over many generations. Sometimes these analyses reveal intriguing hypotheses. For example, a modern Sephardic family in Provence may share a rare haplotype found mostly in Jewish communities. Such a match hints at a shared male ancestor, raising the tantalizing possibility, though far from proof, of Davidic lineage. Ultimately, the search for the Davidic genetic fingerprint is a story of hope and limits. Genetics can illuminate patterns invisible to historical research alone, but it cannot confirm legends on its own. Only by combining genealogy, history, and science can we approach an understanding of this ancient lineage. Yet even with every tool available today, some mysteries may never be fully solved. The threads of David's line stretch into the past, waiting silently, like a puzzle missing its final piece, daring researchers to continue the search across centuries and continents, contested lineages, and the question of faith. Across continents, cultures, and centuries, claims to his lineage have inspired kings, empires, and faiths. One of the most striking examples is the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia. According to tradition, this royal house descends directly from King Solomon, the son of David, and the legendary Queen of Sheba. For centuries, Ethiopian emperors traced their ancestry to this line, claiming both political legitimacy and spiritual authority through an unbroken chain to the biblical kings. Haile Selassie III, the last emperor of Ethiopia, is perhaps the most famous figure in this tradition. His very identity was intertwined with the legacy of David and Solomon, a living symbol of ancient monarchy enduring into the modern world. Yet history and tradition alone cannot settle the question. As of today, there is no verified Y-DNA or ancient DNA linking Haile Selassie or the Solomonic line to David or Solomon. Genetic evidence that could confirm such a lineage is either unavailable, politically sensitive, or deeply complicated. Testing royal lines in Ethiopia is not straightforward. The historical records are intertwined with myth, oral tradition, and political narratives. Scholars and scientists can point to patterns and suggest possibilities, but absolute proof remains elusive. This raises an important question about what descent truly means. Is biological lineage the only measure of legitimacy, or does spiritual and cultural inheritance hold equal weight? In religious texts, the emphasis often leans toward spiritual authority. In the New Testament, for example, Jesus' teachings highlight those who hear the Word of God rather than those who possess a particular bloodline. Throughout Jewish history, the concept of the Messiah, or the Anointed King, was as much about leadership, justice, and faithfulness as it was about inherited DNA. A king or leader's legitimacy could be affirmed by actions, wisdom, and moral authority, rather than only by ancestry. Even in modern times, the symbolic power of Davidic descent cannot be underestimated. Dynasties and leaders across the world have drawn inspiration from the Davidic narrative, the claim to a royal line tied to David has provided cultural cohesion, political influence, and religious significance. In some cases, it has shaped nations, inspired revolts, or legitimized governance. The story of the lineage persists not merely in genealogical records, but in belief, tradition, and identity. Ultimately, the question of Davidic descent becomes as much about faith and symbolism as it is about biology. While genetic testing may one day shed light on ancient lineages, the influence of David's line has already been felt across history. The dawn of paleogenetics and finding DNA in the past. For centuries, the past was locked behind the limits of history, archaeology, and legend. We could read texts, study artifacts, and reconstruct stories, but the secrets written in our very cells remained hidden. That began to change with the rise of paleogenetics, the science of studying ancient DNA. Over the past 20 years, advances in technology have made it possible to extract and sequence DNA from remains that are thousands of years old. Bones, teeth, and even fragments of hair now offer a window into the lives and lineages of people long gone. Modern laboratories handle ancient DNA, or aDNA, with extreme care. Samples are prepared in ultra-clean rooms, free from the slightest contamination. Sophisticated sequencing machines read the fragmented genetic code, while powerful computational tools piece together these broken sequences into coherent genomes. With each improvement, scientists have gained the ability to reconstruct not only the identities of individuals, but also the migrations, diseases, and relationships of entire populations. Yet the work is far from simple. Ancient DNA is fragile. Over centuries, it degrades, breaking into tiny fragments that must be painstakingly analyzed and verified. Contamination with modern DNA, from handling, storage, or the environment, can easily mislead researchers. To ensure accuracy, labs use rigorous controls and independent replication. Multiple teams often repeat experiments in parallel to confirm results. The field demands patience, precision, and a constant awareness of error. Despite these challenges, the applications of aDNA are staggering. Scientists have used it to trace human migrations across continents, to study the spread of ancient diseases, and to uncover long-forgotten population connections. Entire histories can now be rewritten from genetic evidence. Even royal lineages, once accessible only through manuscripts and oral tradition, may now be studied in a laboratory. The promise of paleogenetics is enormous. The ability to illuminate stories lost to time, to test legends against the code of life itself. This science is especially thrilling for mysteries of genealogy. Imagine discovering whether a family line truly stretches back thousands of years, whether a legendary dynasty had living descendants, or whether a famous historical figure's DNA still survives in the modern world. Each new sample is a puzzle piece, fragile and precious, capable of confirming, refuting, or complicating the stories handed down through generations. As remarkable as the technology is, it is only the beginning. Every success opens new questions and new possibilities. Laboratories are now exploring remains from ancient tombs, battlefields, and forgotten settlements, searching for genetic clues that could rewrite history. The potential to connect modern descendants with figures from millennia ago is closer than ever. Let's follow a groundbreaking case study where ancient DNA unlocked one of history's most tantalizing genealogical mysteries. A mystery that has puzzled historians, challenged traditions, and, perhaps, brings us closer to tracing a line that many believed was lost forever: the pharaoh's pedigree and the limits of science. In 2010, the world of science and history watched a remarkable breakthrough. For the first time, scientists used ancient DNA to reconstruct the family tree of an Egyptian pharaoh. Tutankhamun, the boy king of the 18th dynasty, had long been shrouded in mystery. Who were his parents? How was he related to the powerful rulers of his time? A team of researchers analyzed DNA from 11 royal mummies, combining genetics with radiology and historical records to build a 5-generation pedigree. Their findings offered unprecedented insight into one of history's most famous dynasties. The results suggested that KV-55, a male mummy, was very likely Tutankhamun's father, while KV-35, younger lady, was probably his mother. Statistical analysis confirmed this with high probability. Further examination indicated that KV-55 himself was a son of Amenhotep III, placing Tutankhamun firmly within the known royal lineage. This genetic mapping aligned with historical records, demonstrating how DNA could confirm, complement, and even challenge what had been written on papyrus thousands of years ago. Yet science also revealed complexities that history alone could not fully explain. The DNA showed high levels of consanguinity, suggesting that Tutankhamun's parents were closely related, likely siblings. Such evidence of inbreeding is consistent with what we know about Egyptian royal practices, where marriages within the family were common to preserve dynastic power. These findings shed light not only on Tutankhamun's heritage, but also on the medical issues he may have faced during his short life, providing a tangible connection between genetics and history. In a similar vein, rumors about King David's DNA have begun to circulate. The gossip intensifies. In their partial genome data, the scientists allegedly identify a rare mutation, one that could be a genetic disease or something that carried serious health ramifications for David's descendants. Conspiracy theorists speculate, could this mutation explain certain biblical stories, sickness, unusual behavior, or even divine favor? Some team members privately debate, is this a curse or simply a genetic trait that persisted in a limited lineage? Meanwhile, there are murmurings of a clean branch, a subline where the mutation seems to be absent, raising speculation about hidden descendants. Identification of the mummies, however, was not without controversy. While many experts argue that KV-55 was Akhenaten, others question the conclusion. Disputes over age estimation, radiological interpretation, and historical records show the limits of even the most sophisticated genetic analysis. Ancient DNA is fragile and incomplete, and scientists must constantly balance statistical probabilities with historical and archaeological context. The study of Tutankhamun's lineage is a triumph of modern science, but it is also a reminder that certainty is often elusive when dealing with the distant past. For historians and genealogists, the study also offers a tantalizing parallel. Could the same methods be applied to trace the Davidic line? The challenges are far greater. No verified ancient remains, no preserved tombs, and centuries of exile and dispersion make direct analysis nearly impossible. Yet the example of Tutankhamun reminds us that science can push boundaries, uncover secrets, and sometimes reveal connections thought lost to history. The question remains whether the Davidic line, like Egypt's royal blood, could ever be reconstructed, or whether some mysteries are destined to remain beyond reach. What do you think about the mysteries of ancient lineages and the Davidic legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below.